Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to give 1 minute while other attendees log on, and then we'll get going. But thank you so much for joining.
Just go ahead and type in your name, where you're calling in from, and who you're representing or what kind of role you do, so we can get a sense of everyone that's in the room. So appreciate you all being here, and yeah, just let us know who you are and where you're from.
Awesome. Steve, I'll just get going with some introductory remarks, and as people dial on, that should be fine. So welcome, everyone. My name is Zoe Diaz. I'm the current CEO for the Cross-Sector Development Partnerships Initiative, XSPI. I guess I should start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where everyone is dialing in from. For me, it's the Awabakal and Marimi here in Newcastle. Really excited to have this event today. At XSPI, we're all about building bridges between sectors that are working in the development space. In our PNG focused work, we are doing a lot of explorations around locally led development and what that means, and what it means to take the policy rhetoric into practice, or not, as the case may be. Bit of housekeeping before I hand it over to Steve. You will see a Q&A button at the top of your screen. If you're wanting to ask a question that could potentially be raised later in the session, please use that box. If you want to generally chat, or you're putting your background, etc., into the chat, feel free to use that, but we will not monitor that for questions. I think that covers it. Steve, I will hand it over to you. And again, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. And let me add my thanks to Zoe and the team for setting this up, and looking forward to the conversation today around community-driven solutions for locally led development in Papua New Guinea. But let me introduce our panel and get them just to say where they're calling in from, what they're doing, and what they're looking forward to in this particular one. So I'll go in the order that I see them. Cathy, do you want to go first, please?
Yes, good day, everyone. I'm the director with the Advancing PNG Women Leaders Network. I am thrilled to speak on accessing direct funding support to community embedded change champions, utilizing cultural governance whilst meeting donor requirements.
Excellent. Great. I'm going to move to Lorna next.
Hi, I'm Lorna McPherson from Digicel PNG. Been in Papua New Guinea for nearly 16 years. I'm also actively involved in the Rugby League, which is very grassroots across Papua New Guinea, and also the chairman of the Port Moresby Nature Park and within the Digicel Foundation. I think from this discussion as well, I really want to understand how we as a community can work together much more and take all our learning and then work out what's really working and what's not, because ultimately we all want the best for Papua New Guinea, but I don't think that we communicate enough together in what we do, and I think that would be great if we could get to that point.
Excellent. Right. Over to Professor Stephen Howes, our keynote.
Hi, everyone. My name's Stephen Howes. I'm here in Canberra at the Australian National University. I direct the Development Policy Centre. I'm an economist. A lot of my work is on Papua New Guinea, and I'm a big believer in locally led development. So very happy and excited to be part of today.
Excellent. I'll come back to you in a minute. Thanks, Stephen. Let's say hello to Miriam.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Miriam Layton, and I'm with 80 projects, and we are based in Goroka. I have been involved in community development work for many years, and the topic we are going to discuss interests me most because of the way we are going in PNG at the moment, and it's about time we discuss how we can come up with some good ideas to help us maybe find solution to some of the problems that NGOs and civil societies in PNG are facing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Over to Steve Layton.
My name's Steve Layton. I'm also part of the AT Projects team. We're very much a team, the way we operate. It'd be interesting for me to hear what the rest of the panel and the audience have to say about this topic, because we don't really talk about it that often. So I'm just quite prepared to, well, not only to be on the panel, but to be part of the audience and listen to.
Right.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Steve Goudswaard. I'm also with Expo. But I've had a long association with Papua New Guinea, and particularly with working in complexity and uncertainty, which we all know is what Papua New Guinea is like. I think, like Lorna said, just how can we access contextual intelligence? How can we bring what we as externals have with what people inside Papua New Guinea have, and contribute together for something that's better for all of us? I'm not sure we're doing this in the best possible way, and I think we're leaving some wisdom on the table that is not being accessed well for the entire system. So that's my interest. We are expecting Paul Barker to attend, but I'll bring him in after Professor Stephen Howes has spoken. But for everyone who's attending, please just drop into the chat box. What do you want out of today? You've heard from us as the panel what our expectation is. We'd love to hear from you what your expectation or your desire or even your question is in the chat box. And appreciate you all being here. But let me hand it over to Stephen Howes. I know there's 3 Steves here, so we'll be very careful how we talk about each other. We know who we mean, but some of you won't. So let's just we'll get over that. But Stephen, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And good afternoon again, or good morning, depending on where you are. Yeah, I was asked to just give a kind of overview or context, I guess, to kick off the discussion. And I was given this, headline, is PNG a failed state or a future state? And I mean, the way I look at it is that the PNG state is a weak state. It's not failed, right? Life goes on. A lot of good things still happening. A lot of opportunities for business and for church and other organizations to thrive. But definitely the PNG state or PNG government is not in a position to provide that development leadership that successful countries need. So I call it weak rather than fragile. And, I know some people think it's too critical, it's too negative, it's sort of anti-PNG. But of course, it's not a commentary at all on the people of PNG. It's a commentary on the government, and I think it's reflected by what the people think. In fact, we just did. I'll talk about my involvement with the University of Papua New Guinea in a minute, but we just did a survey with one of my UPNG colleagues of some 300 University of Papua New Guinea students, undergraduate students, and one of the questions we asked them was, do you think the country, that is, do you think PNG is going in the right direction or the wrong direction? It's a standard public opinion question. And, maybe about 20% sort of didn't want to answer the question. I guess maybe they were embarrassed about it. But although the 80% who answered it, like 19 out of 20 said it's going in the wrong direction, right? You only had 1 out of 20 saying it's going in the right direction. So I think, people aren't dumb. They know what's going on. There are serious problems in the country, and you can see that in the economy. But just another indicator, that I think is really striking of the problems PNG is facing is the immunization rate. For children, that's a kind of indicator of how the government's able to get out, provide basic public health services for its people. And unfortunately, PNG sits right at the bottom of the global league table. It actually has the lowest immunization rate in the world, lower even than countries that are embroiled in in conflict. And, you could say, well, that's because of very difficult terrain or the islands and the mountains. But in fact, you could look over time and you can see that immunization rate coming down. So it's not just the geography is difficult, but in some ways, things have got worse. So it is a challenging situation in PNG. I think that's got to be the starting point. And then, the question is, well, what do you do about it, right? I guess that's why we're all here. And, I'm very much of the view only Papua New Guineans can solve Papua New Guinea's problems. It's not for me as an outsider. I can't do it. And, the entire aid industry, aid has never made a country rich, right? Aid is a tool that countries can use. But outsiders can't do it. Aid can't do it. So it's really a challenge facing the people of Papua New Guinea. And that's why, as I mentioned right at the start, I'm such a believer in locally led development. That is the only way forward. And I'll just spend, the few minutes I've got left sort of talking about how I've been trying to put that into practice, I guess, over the last 10 years or so. As I mentioned, we've got this partnership with the University of Papua New Guinea. Some of you might have heard of the PNG Update. It's a big conference we hold in the middle of the year, every year. But that's sort of our flagship. We have a wide range of activities, but sort of the core of it is training, trying to identify their best students as they come out from the undergraduate level, giving them some experience as tutoring, seeing if they've got the interest, they want to be a teacher. This is especially in economics, which is in our area. So, we're tackling just one small part of the university, but bringing those people out to the ANU for postgraduate training, and then bringing them back to UPNG, and they've become lecturers. And there was only one lecturer in the whole department when we started 10 years ago, and now we're up to 7. So we've really made progress, and they're teaching, they're researching, they're commenting. Like I said, I did this public opinion or student opinion survey with one of them. So they're providing the analysis and the research and the education that the country needs to address its problems. So that's one example. And the second one is more of an NGO example, which is, I chair Family PNG. Family PNG is a non-government organization that assists survivors of family and sexual violence and helps them get the services they need, whether it's like a safe house or legal support. And although I am the chair, it's a PNG NGO. It's registered in PNG. Of the 70 staff, only one is an expatriate. But it's a NGO that's able to, because it's quite large, it has good governance. We have a distinguished board, and we have annual accounts and an audit. And on the basis of that, we're able to get not only both donor funding and government of PNG funding. And then we're able to use that and pass some of that money and do some training and pass resources on to other much smaller community-based non-government organizations. I think it is difficult for the smaller organizations to access government or especially donor support because of the hurdles you have to jump through. And I think this model of having several of them, but having larger intermediaries that can intermediate, act as a go-between between the donors and the smaller community-based organizations. I think that is a very promising way to take the locally led development agenda forward. Yeah, but I think locally led development is the way to go, but it's easy to have as a slogan. I think what we really need to do is hear how it's working or how it's not working, and so I'm looking forward very much to today's discussion and learning from you all. So thanks, Steve. I'll leave it there for now, and happy to join in the discussion.
Thanks very much, Stephen. I appreciate you setting it up there. And this tension between sort of the worsening versus the hope, the resources, the capacity, the commitment that we can draw on. We can look at the problems, or we can look at the solutions and maximize that. So I appreciate you saying that. Cathy, I'm going to come to you next and just sort of ask you to pick up on this thread of what you see in the context and what you guys are doing and what gives you hope.
So just on Stephen's talking points regarding the intermediaries. The challenge here in the country is the for-profit intermediaries and not-for-profit intermediaries. And we've got a lot of for-profit intermediaries in the country that's very challenging. We see that a lot of the funds that's supposed to go right down to the communities are consumed within the for-profit intermediaries. While what Steve mentioned about family PNGs are not for profit, that kind of model really works, and we're part of that. We manage grants for those who are embedded right within the communities. We don't make much from it. It's basically having a very transparent proposal writing process right from the ground with the implementers and us, and then putting on top the management fees that they know of. So that transparent process is very critical because PNG, when I mentioned and introduced myself as trying to work within the cultural governance, it's something that's practiced and it's not something that's written. PNG is made up of a society that's strongly rooted in its culture, and cultural governance is what we practice right through even in organizations. Though we try to meet the governance, that's what we've been taught, especially on organizations. You implement using the cultural governance. So for us, it's having a not-for-profit that's within PNG or local. It really helps to blend those two together. So you have a delivery that's very successful, that doesn't disrupt the existing peace and harmony structure of the society, that doesn't push any agenda in because you have to meet certain, but you try to meet the donor requirements, but also ensure the community's peace and structure, peace and harmony structure is maintained, because right now the country really, really needs this.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Cathy. Lorna, let me come to you, because I know that your organisation is an example of an intermediary, and how you respond to some of what you've heard from Stephen and Cathy.
Yeah, so to be honest, we actually set up because of the fact we felt that a lot of the NGOs, the money wasn't really getting to the people on the ground, and it wasn't being effective as well. So the way that we set up in the foundation back in 2010 was really to become an effective organisation and deliver projects to the communities, but also really involve in the communities and actually working with them so they could actually solve their own problems as well. So, so if I look at what we've actually achieved, since 2010, and I'll talk about education because I think that's really effective. We've built over 685 classrooms across Papua New Guinea. Now, how did we do that? We did it with using the likes of our we had key project managers who understood the issues within the communities, but we used our own staff and we used the local communities to actually do those projects and roll them out. So that was understanding the culture, because again, as Cathy said, the culture and understanding each of the different. So every area has different types of cultures and hierarchies. So it's understanding that on the ground and understanding how you would implement that, but also working with them and talking with them about how we would implement and roll projects out hand in hand with them. So we took the communities with us every single way, but also from a compliance point as well, Steve, to make sure that we were also auditable and we were actually following rules. Our project managers helped the communities apply for it and apply for the grants so for instance, our community-led grants, because they had to be compliant as well. So we didn't just abandon ship, but we went the whole way with them, walking hand in hand right through to teach, because people in grassroots areas quite often can't read or write. So how do you then get projects out to those areas, and how do they apply for funds unless you walk hand in hand with them to be effective?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. I reckon Miriam or Steve would have some ideas around that and some of their experience. Would you guys like to contribute from your perspective?
It looks like I've been volunteered to start this, so I suppose that's normal with married couples. 80 projects we're not a donor as such, but we've abandoned the donor community very much to be self-sufficient. And we've been able to do that with one or two donors. And we're not exclusively non-donor applicable, but we don't really see that donors have a major role in the development of AT projects. We generate a lot of our own funds from selling products we either make or projects we do on behalf of other clients, and provincial government being one. So we try to generate our own funding as much as possible, and it's proven mildly successful over the last 20 years, where we've moved into this stream of being a social enterprise. So we don't have a lot to offer by way of working with other donors to do donor-funded projects. We do a lot of the projects by ourselves, sometimes in collaboration with other NGOs, but always looking towards self-sufficiency. Now, in some ways, that's been a little bit easier for AT projects because we're a technical-based NGO. So we're able to, we see a problem in the health department where the waste from a health centre is burnt in a hole. But we find that children go down the hole to get the syringes to use them as water pistols. So just digging more holes isn't a solution. So we've come up with a relatively low-cost incinerator, which we sell to the health department. So in some ways, we're in a bit of an unusual situation because we're able to make products that different people want to buy. So in that sense, we're a social enterprise. And that's been very much part of the key to the success over the last 20 plus years of AT projects. Mm. So our approach is very much not to continue to look towards donors, but more to look towards what we can do to promote not only ourselves, but promote products that are useful to people.
Mm. Mm. Stephen, let me come back to you because you referred to the aid industry, and it is an industry, and it is part of the dynamic. And so, playing the game of accessing and accountability versus the application is part of that. In what you've heard, is there anything that you would take out and say these are things that we can build on?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a very there's a lot of common points. I think, in fact, this idea of an intermediary role seems to be one a number of the people here play, which is great. I think I'm not, like with what Cathy said. I mean, I'm not against being an economist. You know, I'm not against the private sector. I think we need the private sector, but I totally agree. It's got to be transparent, and it's got to be transparent. And going on to aid and your question, Steve, I think, the aid can certainly support sort of good locally led development. And both the examples I've gave, and, like I've personally been involved in, they have been supported by the Australian Aid Program. So I give them a lot of credit for that. And if you look at, what's been strong about that experience, what's been positive. I mean, to me, when I look back, a couple of things stand out. One, they're both long-term efforts. So it's, they've both been going on for like 10, 11 years. I think, too many aid projects are short-term, like 3 years, and then you move on, 5 years, and you move on. I think you've got to take a really long-term approach, because when you go back to what I was saying at the start, some things are getting worse, but we want things to get better. I mean, this is a historical process, right? No one knows what the future holds. Look at the countries that are regarded as successful today, like say in Europe, they were immersed in warfare for centuries, right? So these are long historical processes that are underway. All we can do is do our best, but it's certainly going to be a long-term effort. So I think that's one thing that's really important. And then second, flexible funding. I mean, I give DFAT, Australian Aid Program, credit. They've been pretty flexible with this funding. They haven't been overly prescriptive. They've allowed us to adapt and change as we've gone. So aid certainly can be a force for good for locally led development, but can also backfire. And I think, maybe some of what Cathy was getting at was, I certainly sympathize with, some of the big Australian contractors that implement the aid program. There seems to be a feeling shared with government that if we just have more Papua New Guineans working for those companies, like Palladium, Cardno, that's locally led development. And to me, that's not locally led development, right? And in fact, often you see where those people are coming from, they're doing something that's a lot more useful, and they're coming attracted by the very high pay offered by the aid industry, being taken out and put in this role where they're nowhere near as influential. So, I'm sure you need those companies to deliver the aid program, but to me, they should have a sort of very light touch and as much as possible, just pass on that funding in that flexible long-term way to the PNG organizations, and then let them act as intermediaries to cascade the funding down.
Cathy, I see you nodding along to what Stephen's saying. Surely, though, large-scale contractors are just a variation of the social enterprise that Steve was talking about, just at a different scale. What's the difference between a large-scale contractor and a small-scale social enterprise when it comes to locally led development?
So one of the things that I've seen when it comes to sustainability is ensuring whatever we do as businesses, if it's a service that's a public service that the government's supposed to do, that we are filling in as NGOs, is ensuring we don't create parallel pathways or parallel systems. One of the things that I've seen we've done is by, just giving a 3,000 kina to a women leader who's from Copiago. She uses that money to mobilize the community to revive a 15-year-old aid post that has, that just did not operate, wasn't functioning for 15 years. And that, by then bringing in the Provincial Health Authority, after it's revived, we launched it, we brought in media, but then we brought in the provincial government to also see that this is part of their service, and they took it on. They took it on, and it's now like a six-bed health center now. This is sustainability. It goes right within the government process. The other one that we've worked with the youth in Kutubu LLG, we've started mobilizing them through the International Youth Day, just bringing in the youth to start seeing the future in PNG, and that for them to know that it's in their hands. They've built a resource center, and from that resource center, it's now a TVET center. So stakeholders like Santos, Exxon, and others have come on board. And it's now gone into the government system. So in everything that we do, for us, is how do we tie it into the government system? It has to go into the government system, so it becomes part of the service they're supposed to be providing. So I see that way as a sustainable model. And of course, with the social enterprise, it's a very promising when it comes to communities that are right within forests and right into areas that are very remote, but really need money for school fees, for medicine, for salt, sugar, not sugar, but for salt, soap. These are the basics that everyone in very remote communities needs. They need money. For them, so many times NGOs, we go in, we try to help them with livelihood programs, but they need a market. And for a market to come in, it needs a business. And that's where the social enterprise comes in. I've been doing my small house line souvenirs, And I do Bosavi, Mount Bosavi Bilums, not because I wanted to do money, make money from it, but because I saw the need that they live in a community. The environment is very intact, it's a virgin forest, untouched at all. But then they've got all this project around and logging that's around it. They'd be tempted anytime when they see the real need for money for their health and education for the kids. They would just give away the forest for 10 kina a cubic, which is logging. You get a 10 kina a cubic monthly for as royalty and equity. And for them, when they have no experience at all to earn income, they think 10 kina a cubic per month is money. But what I've done is help them to harvest, not harvest. I told them I'll provide markets for the Mount Bosavi natural fiber billows. And what they've done is what they do is not chop down the tree. They remove the bark of the tulip tree. They make balloons from it. And I work with another community-based organization that make sure the quality is done. They bring it. So we pay for the supply chain. I do the market here in Port Moresby and they end. So we've started in 2018 from 10 villages. We've now gone into 26 villages. People, it's more than 50, 60,000 has gone in. And what I've seen is when they are earning income, they can make the very firm, informed decision that, no, I know what I earn. Without chopping a tulip tree, I'm just removing the bark. I make 500 kina a month. I will not let you chop down my ancestral, that tree that stood there in the jungle since my ancestors. And for you to chop that, you destroy everything along with it. I will not. I'd rather make the 500 kina pay month than giving it away my forest. And that's where social enterprise is very, very important.
It is, and the example that you're providing is you are working at scale, but you're working from the drive of local people. In terms of the aid that you talked about, what would be the barrier that you would want to break down? So Stephen's talked about flexible funding and a long-term approach, but from your perspective, what would be the one thing that you would say to the aid world? Please change this.
Yes, I would honestly love to see the capacity building aspect, that every donor comes in and says, we have to build a capacity of local organizations. We've not seen local organizations managing big contracts. No, we've not seen that yet. We're still under for-profit contractors. I'd really love to see them transiting. You can't be here forever to manage and make profit. They're creating an ecosystem that's dangerous for this country. The aid ecosystem, we're managing contractors. And now with US aid coming in, we've got a lot more contractors than before. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And people like us do not have the chance or stand a chance to even go there. No one wants to build a capacity to replace them when they go away. It's a business and it's crazy. I'd love to see them placing effort on family PNG, advancing PNG women leaders, build their capacity to a level where we focus on managing, and we are just giving it directly to people who are embedded right within the communities, people who are facing the issues, but who have the solutions as well, who understand the cultural context, who know how to manage, but also at the same time, they help us to manage, making sure we deliver and meet the donor requirements. But what we do is also, while they're delivering, we help them to understand that for you, in order for others to support, these are the requirements as an entity on the ground you have to meet as well. The bigger ones you cannot meet in terms of auditing and accounting, we are meeting it. For you is ensuring you deliver and the receipts are acquitted for. Yeah. So I'd honestly love to see the transition.
Yeah, no, I see that. Miriam and Lorna, I see you both nodding along. Miriam, what are you thinking around in response to what Cathy said?
Cathy Alex, hi.
Hi, Miriam.
Cathy is doing what she's doing on a different level with where the big companies are involved. And it is said I have very little knowledge to contribute towards what she's raising today. Yeah. My experience is to do with NGOs and aid. the aid world, the donors, is, we have been getting aids from donor partners for many, many years. And it is sad to say there's not much to show for, because I have been involved in community development for many, many years. And the way we are going now is scary. It is sad, like, we're going to heading towards failed state or weak state, and the donor world has to. I'm pleased about the conversation we are having. This is the first time in my life to just talk about whether it's working or not. And I think it is time. It is time for donor partners as well as local beneficiaries, civil society, NGOs, to have a decent conversation, to have an honest conversation. Is there a way we can come up with how we can maybe help improve the way we are going? We have enough experience working on the ground, working with donor partners. So as Steve Layton was mentioning, how 80 project operates now. We were fortunate some years back, OSAID, before they were deferred, they came to us because they were funding lots of projects and helping us to develop things that we were using to help community. But they came to us and questioned when big companies were trying to do what we were doing. They came to us and said, you can change your focus and change your mission, vision, and thinking, entrepreneurship, social enterprise. You have to think about how you can survive when OSAID pulls out. And they sent a consultant to 80 projects, and she was a female. She spent a week plus, and she took us through how we can think differently, because in the past we were just depending on donor funding, and when we used that, we apply, and that was a normal thing we were doing. But when OSAID came in, said you can think about how you can sell your product. So they after they took us through, we realized we were up against companies who were in business and who are very smart. They recruit very smart businessmen and women to think for them and produce products to sell. And we are in water and sanitation. So some of the toilets and things we were doing, they were also doing. So in order for us to compete with them, we also have to start thinking smart and recruit smart people, because we don't want peanuts, but we had to recruit engineers and recruit smart people to come. Even though we are technical NGO, we want them to do the thinking and helping so we can improve on the product we were doing. So that's what we did. So we have been operating at 80 project is 26 years old, and Steve earlier on mentioned we're selling, but we still have some donor partners, and we have to sit down and talk on real terms. We don't go for their money, but we talk on real terms. Okay, let's get into this. We understand each other. We go out and do development work. Before we were beggars, and we can say yes, but now we can sit down and talk business. So that's what we are doing at the moment. So we are still providing community service using government money, and also selling our products to survive. In PNG, when you look around, lots of NGOs and civil societies are dying. And just from my experience and the little I know, the donors have to also think about changing their criteria, how they come and approach us. So from day one, we should start talking about when they leave, how
Right.
can we sustain? Because they won't be around us forever. They come, they have certain time they spend with us, and they will leave. And that has to be discussed. And both parties must understand when they get into partnership, so that by the time they leave, can they still survive? That kind of question needs to be discussed, and make sure they start a project on that base, so that they still can survive and support themselves after donors leave. That kind of discussion is not taking place. They come, they give us money, we do projects. Sometimes we can easily lose our focus because they have money, and we don't make decisions and do what we want to do because we're not independent enough to raise our point of view to say, oh, can it be done this way? Because we know our people better.
Yeah.
Like Cathy is saying, she knows Mosavi and that part of the province better enough to work with donor partners to contribute towards whatever Cathy is involved in doing, providing service. So, there is need for us to start talking more on this PNG led, development, and we have to come up with a solution. And I'm happy. I'm happy that we are talking today. Thank you.
Excellent. Lorna, I mean, both Cathy and Miriam are talking about mindset shifts at the donor level, as well as the emergent sort of capacity development. What are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that we're successful is the fact that we give power, and I think there's been some comments in the chat as well about where's the power for the Indigenous voices and the ways. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have learned as a company, is the fact is to empower the villages, empower the people, and actually work with them hand in hand, and actually listen to what they say. And therefore, that's why we can build classrooms, but also when we're doing it as well as teaching people, because if you want to get sustainability, you teach somebody how to build a classroom, they can build another one. It doesn't have to be a Digicel Foundation classroom. It can be another classroom for somebody else, because you've taught them the skills and you've taught them how to do it, but also the fact they understand as well their own ways and how to get things done. And that's why we're effective. And just as a point, even when we build towers, right, so we've got a kind of where we are making money, our foundation we're not, and it's all done volunteering, and we don't do it that way. So but the likes of even there, when we're effective with our towers, everything again is done by the community. They build the towers, they work with us hand in hand, they manage the towers, they manage make sure the towers are safe, etc. And that's the one secret that quite often NGOs are really missing out, is the fact, let the communities and work with them. They understand themselves better than we can ever as foreigners. And that's just it, straight.
Yeah, Stephen, if we zoom out at national level, and I'm speaking to you as an economist now more than an NGO leader, we understand these concepts of locally led is more appropriate and things like that. But we also know that PNG is one of Australia's biggest trading partners. And so where does the macro and the micro need to shift so that this power dynamic is more balanced?
I don't know. If you're asking how, could you just ask that question again, Steve? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that with Australia and PNG being such big business partners, there will always be a big aid program that is attendant to that. That the notion of aligning sort of a macro desire for Australia and PNG to see what happens in that country, with the micro of engaging people, engaging what they want to do. That we know that. But what's getting in the way is such that you're saying and the others are saying that things are worsening, even though we know this.
Right. Well, I think, both sides, both Australia and definitely Papua New Guinea, would like to see the relationship between the two countries actually revolve less around aid and more around trade. And I guess that's a more mature relationship. And I mean, let's face it, no one likes being an aid recipient, right? It's an unequal relationship. So there's that strong desire to move in terms of trade, but you can't force that. And yes, Australia is a big trading partner, or the biggest trading partner with PNG. But when you look at what's PNG exporting to Australia, it's mainly gold, right? It's mainly gold, and they're mainly from the couple of huge mines plus some small alluvial gold. And then Australia is exporting sort of consumer goods to PNG, but that's a role increasingly China's taking on. So I think fixing the trade relationship is pretty much the same challenge as the PNG faces more generally. How do you get more economic activity going? I think the one sort of missing piece of the puzzle, if we're just talking more broadly, beyond aid, and then, trade, a little bit limited. I think migration and labor mobility, that's, I think if I put that on the table, I think there's very little contact at the people-to-people level between the two countries. A lot of Australians you meet, they know maybe an uncle, a relative that used to work in PNG or even fought. But among the younger generation, the contacts aren't as strong. And if you look on the PNG side, Australia's basically kept Papua New Guineans out, right? We had the White Australia policy, I mean, to our shame, which basically excluded immigration. And then when we moved away from that, we went to a skill-based system, and that's, Papua New Guineans just couldn't compete under the skill-based system. So the PNG diaspora in Australia is tiny. I think it's like the 89th largest. It's below Latvia, a tiny European country. So I think people-to-people contacts have been underdone, and that's an area we could really grow. And there is one where there's promising signs. So, now we have the PALM scheme, Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme. Unfortunately, sort of PNG kind of ignored that scheme for a while, but has now got involved in it and is sending workers across to Australia. And then we also have the Pacific Engagement Visa, right, which is really a radical new step that will actually opens up a permanent residency route for Papua New Guineans to come to Australia, find a job, and stay here for life and bring their family and children if they want. So, yeah, it's maybe beyond today's conversation, but that's definitely something I'm also a big fan of. I think having more people-to-people contact will really help these kind of issues. It'll also really help PNG, because it just means PNG will be more integrated. There'll be more ideas coming back. And this kind of outside assistance, I've been talking about, could also be done by Papua New Guineans who've moved to Australia, and they'll keep their links, retain their involvement.
Lorna, sport's a big connector for people-to-people contact. What are you seeing in rugby league that might be able to be built on?
I mean, even in the grassroots and rugby league as well. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the likes of like when we're helping fund teams out in the different areas, as well as the fact that it's actually building up that community and actually allowing them to actually use the funds wisely and monitor how they're doing it, but working with them hand in hand. So we bring in some experts, and then we go and we train and we coach, but then we go away again, because we're not there for good. You've got to get the communities to run their own leagues and actually then create their own pathways as well and monitor that. So even in sports as well, for me, the grassroots, the pathways, etc. as well, is yes, you can bring in the experts, and I think that's the big key thing, is the fact that there is experts there and you can work with the communities, understand them, train them. But then you have to leave. You have to allow the communities to work themselves and actually be able to sustain themselves, sport, or even in the likes of aid as well. So that for me is very key. And I think that's one thing that we're really focusing on in rugby league across PNG.
Thanks. Cathy, I'm looking at this, this shift towards managing contractors that's coming up in the chat box as well. I guess I wonder why there is a shift towards managing contractors when there is a lot of local knowledge, when there is a lot of working at local level, either through community-based organisations or through social enterprise. What do you think is getting in the way of expanding and enabling organisations such as yours?
So let me give an example. So one of the basic requirements for any donor to support an organization within a community is to ensure your books are properly kept. That means you have to employ an accountant. You have to have your books audited. Then people in the communities form organizations in the hope to help solve an issue. They're not so much into making sure the capacity of the organization is there. For them is to be there so that issues don't get out of hand. There is a hope to hold the society together. And they are the critical people that are holding the country. We cannot divert them away from that. And most times they do the work voluntarily because it's their community. Now, for an organization like APNG, we usually tell them, keep doing what you are doing. What we will do is ensuring our books are audited every year, making sure the MYOB, we can't even afford an accountant. What we do is getting a retainer who comes monthly to ensure our books are kept properly and it's prepared for an independent auditor to come in. That a community-based organization cannot afford to do. I can't. But the managing contractors, for-profit managing contractors, they have everything to do that. When you look at the funds that come to organizations like us, co-funding is not a priority. Program, and usually it's not program, it's projects. Projects that have a time frame to it. But you're dealing with the people that have a life that doesn't have a time frame.
Yeah. That goes back to Stephen's point about long-term view, but and your own point about investing in capability. But before I open
I
up,
just want to. Do you mind if I just want to, that really rang a bell with me, what Cathy was saying. I mean, we at Family PNG, we make sure we do our accounts and audit every year, but the audit's like a life and death experience every year. I mean, it's really tough. And I often say like ANU would fail the audit if it was held to PNG standards. I think in Australia, like if you've lost a receipt, it's like, okay, you've lost the receipt, just sign a statutory declaration. Whereas a PNG, it's like, oh, you've lost the receipt, you must have stolen the money. Right? So there's a very low level of trust. I find the audits incredibly tough, and I think that is a real barrier. I'm not surprised that more NGOs don't do the audit, and I don't know what the solution is to that, but I think that should be a real effort, because it is, like Cathy said, it's a real barrier. If you don't have the audits, it's a real barrier to getting core funding. You might get project funding, or even Digicel will help you build a school. But actually, in terms of getting core funding, it's really difficult if you can't get those audits. But the audits are incredibly tough, and it's hard to hire accountants, right? They all work for the big multinationals, get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. And you understand why aid industry needs compliance, but compliance and accountability are two different things. Sorry, Lorna, you were going to say?
Sorry, I was just actually agreeing with what Stephen was saying, is the fact that compliance is absolutely there, but that's the likes of the companies like Digicel. We can be compliant and we make sure that we're compliant, but the likes of the communities, we work with them hand in hand, and we make sure we get the receipts, and we make sure that the communities are compliant. If you know what I mean. So if we're buying something, we've got a receipt for it, and then it goes back into our audit track. But that's our responsibility, and that's what makes us different and unique. Because as Cathy said, there's no possibility. Most of them can't even read and write. So how are they possibly going to be able to do what you're asking them to do? It's madness. It's madness, and that's why foundation's there and created to do that. And yet, we volunteer on it, but what I'm saying is the fact that you have to understand that, and that's why we created the foundation, because we just thought it was crazy what was being asked out there, and that's honestly the situation. And it's like, I feel as if it's 16 years I've been in PNG, and I've said the same thing continually, but there's not any ears out there listening to what actually works for Papua New Guinea. And I know I'm a foreigner, but I'm married to a Papua New Guinean. I'm part of a community and I'm part of a village, and believe me, what I have learned is quite phenomenal, and it's changed my whole outlook on it. So what Cathy is saying is absolutely factual, and those NGOs out there need to start to listen to it.
Yeah, and so there is it comes back to the mindset of what can I learn from you, and how can I contribute to an overall system from your knowledge and my knowledge that's not being accessed. And yeah, I think Expire is looking at creating sort of a service hub so that these kinds of things can be invested into. The challenge is what Stephen said, is that there isn't forward investment in this kind of thing. So project funding and contracting and things like that, yes, you can, but to invest in the capability to provide basic level accountability services, that's really hard to find, and I think that is something that's getting in the way. But before I get off, let me get off my soapbox and see, Zoe, can you show me where the questions are so that we can at least start to address them?
Yeah, sure. So there's a Q&A button, should be at the top next to chat. And there's a few in there. I've also been sending them to you on WhatsApp if that's easier.
It is easier because I don't see it. I don't see the button.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but do you?
Yeah. Maybe the first question was for the panel. Thanks, Dan Evans. Any thoughts on the theory of change that are most applicable to PNG, which have been shown to have been ineffective or actually failed? So how can we move from what previous theory of change has been to a theory of change that is actually working?
Cool.
I'll send the rest to you on WhatsApp.
Yeah, no, that's good. Stephen, do you want to kick us off on that one, and then I might bounce to one of the others.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks, Dan. Good to hear from you. Theory of change. Yeah, I think it's there's no one size fits all. So I don't think we could be prescriptive about it. I think it's more, I talk about principles of change, and they're the ones I've mentioned, which is having a flexible approach, having a long-term approach. And then I just want to highlight what Steve and Miriam were saying, like they're raising their own money. So I think having skin in the game is really important. Like, that's part of our approach. Like, no one pays me to work with you, PNG, right? Or to work with family. And in Family PNG, we go out, we also raise our own funds. I mean, we have we sell coffee from a women's cooperative. We do fundraisers. Yeah, so I think that whole thing, you want to look for people who've got skin in the game, people who want to make a difference anyway, whether they're outsiders or insiders. And then how can you leverage their activities, right? You don't want to be funding 100%. I don't think that sort of 100% funding contractor principal agent model really works. You want to do it a partnership with people who've got skin in the game. So yeah, those are some principles of change that I point to, rather than a kind of fully fledged theory of change.
Yep. Cathy, building on are there any other principles? You've talked about investment in the right kind of capability. You've talked about honouring the autonomy of local partners. What else would you include in principles of change?
I completely agree with Stephen when he mentioned about those who have the skin in the game. When we say local community change makers, these are the ones, day in and out. They do it not for money, not for recognition, not for power, but because they see the need and they see that voice needs to be there, the platform needs to be there. They need to be the ones standing in between. So, and those that are right within the communities are the ones that make the difference. For support to come, it has to reach them where it's supposed to be. If it's 100% support, maybe a 70% reaching them, it's far better than a 20% that we see most of the times when it comes to aid. And that, honestly, I'd like to see the change. And one of the things that I see with our communities, a lot of money is not good. A lot of money going into the communities is not good. But utilizing it in such a way, because if we look at aid coming into the PNG, not just from DFAT, from EU, from everyone, we've been one of the most aided countries, yet the stats are increasing like crazy, yet the place is not safe at all. And yet you see drugs in communities are rising to a level where I don't know what aid is doing in PNG. I don't believe that more money will make the change. I believe it's how we support those who are, like those who have the skin in the game, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm going to move on because of the questions and the time that we've got left. Stephen, for you, a recent TED talk by a former UK Minister of International Development proposed aid should not be program-based or on consultancy fees, but based on direct funding to individuals. Any thoughts on whether this would apply to PNG and how it might work?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's really a question for the government, right? And it's a question like, should there be a safety net, like cash transfers? I know in PNG there's been a general like reluctance to go down that route. It seems like it'll create dependency if you just give people cash. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people facing a very genuine hardship, right? You think about older people, think about disabled people. And so, yeah, personally, I think, that would be a good way for PNG to spend some of its resource money, is to try and provide some support to the poorest in the community. But it would be a big job because you've got to develop that apparatus. When you're a it's not easy. So I don't think it's something donors can do themselves, but I think it would be a good something the government should think about. Just while I got the floor, Steve, I might just ask something about managing contractors and what they should do. And I think it's easy to criticize them.
Yep.
I also want to clarify, I know some very good Papua New Guineans working for Australian managing contractors. I've got nothing against that, right? That's good. I'm just saying that itself is not localization, right? Because these managing contractors are going to come and go. So I think for managing contractors, the same challenge as everyone else here, right? They're also an intermediary. So how do they, not get out of the way, but how do they form those partnerships with other NGOs and with smaller organizations? How do they embrace locally led development? They can be a real asset, but my point is that just having national staff, however good those staff are, however good that idea is, that to me itself is not localization. Like you got to go beyond that.
Yeah, and I take your points and the ones that are here too, that if you've got a managing contractor, you've got the place for people to learn and develop the kinds of capacities that we're talking about in terms of base accountability and things like that. But as the comment said, the managing contractor motive is a profit motive. So how would you ameliorate the profit motive to be focused more on community development?
Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation. I think it's a bit unfair to say they're profit motivated. I mean, I guess some of them are, but as an economist, again, nothing wrong with a profit motive, and you can reinvest those profits. I think it's getting them to embrace those same principles, right? Taking a long-term view, allowing them to take a flexible view, encouraging them to seek out partners that got skin in the game, and developing that partnership model.
Yeah, sure. All right, well, so let's expand it to another one of the questions, which is what are the responsibilities of all stakeholders to change? It's easy to take someone and go, let's point at them, but inside this conversation, what do you see in your area of the area that you can change? Lorna, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll go over to the Laytons.
Well, I think one of the things for me for changing is actually as communities and this, when I'm talking about funding and the likes of community coming together and taking it as a learning. I think, Steve, you highlighted that before, taking the expertise that's available. And even for us in the foundation and also some of the other charities that I'm involved in, is what can we learn from people like Cathy? How can I tap into that knowledge and actually take the learning and actually take that where I actually learn about it before I go and do something else? And I think from me, if I'm taking something and taking away, is really how are we going to do that and how do we do it differently? And how do I learn from how do I learn more from Miriam and how do I learn more from Cathy? And I think that for me is highlighting that is something that we as a unit here today need to come together and work out is to take the brains and put it into something that we can articulate and say, this really works really, really well. So if you're going to do this, follow this route as well. And then ultimately as well, I think is making sure that we have long-term impacts of what we do. And making sure that everybody has skin in the game, and I absolutely love that. That's so true, because we make sure that happens, whether it's having some money up front and working with us from the communities, or whether, for example, the communities actually accommodate our project managers Papua New Guinean project managers that might send up from Port Moresby and have to stay there while we're building the school, etc., to work with them hand in hand and teach them. So, you know, in one way, shape or form, that community has to have skin in the game. So how do we take that? I love the term. So how do we do that more as well? Yeah.
Yeah, good. Appreciate that. Miriam or Steve, what do you think is the prompt in this conversation for change in the way that you guys are working?
One of the ways in which we have seen communities change, if you like, is that when we do a project, we don't go there and say, oh, we have a donor or we provide funding. We do the reverse. We say, you have to pay us. Now, most communities will plead poverty, but the reality is that when someone from our village wants to marry a woman from, say, Mount Hagen, the people in Mount Hagen will put a bride price of 26 to 30,000 kina for that bride price. And the guy who wants to get married calls upon his one talks, and that money appears almost by magic. It's there. So when we have people come to us and say, can you put in a water supply? We say, yep, we'll send one of our young engineers along. He will scope what needs to be done. And the cost of her doing that is going to be 3,000 or 4,000 kina. Now come up with the money and we'll do that part of the project. And we've found that if the people really want that water, they will come up with the money. And they will find that 3,000 or 4,000 kina to allow us to send one of our younger engineers along to do a scoping. Sometimes it's more than that. But what we found is that when people really want a water supply, for example, and hopefully toilets, they will come up with the money. And we can then do the work and present them with a project proposal that could run into hundreds of thousands of kina. But we will not go out and find that money. The community themselves will use their own resources, their own skilled people, and find the money. So we don't face the problem that people don't have the money. Now, obviously, if we go there and say it's going to be 100,000 kina, and it's a really poor community, they may not be able to raise it. But then they will use their initiative and go to their local members or whatever.
The political
and
capital.
Hopefully find the money. So we don't run into this problem of where people themselves don't have access to finding this sort of money. People they do have access to finding that money. It's a matter of maybe pointing them in the right direction, giving them encouragement. But we don't see that there is a massive problem that people have to rely on external donors.
Excellent.
What we see is the reverse of that.
Thank you. Now, I appreciate that. I'm going to move us towards wrapping up. I want you to think about what is the specific action or recommendation from this conversation that you'd like to say as your final comment. Very short comment. I'll go around. Stephen, I'll end with you so you can have the closing comments. But let me start with Cathy and then go to Lorna. So, Cathy, what's the specific action either you can take or that you're recommending to this audience?
I'm going to speak from the perspective of the country. What's destroying our country is that we're losing our values that's been keeping our country, cultural values, to the good ethics and moral. Any support that needs to come to anyone needs to promote values that's holding this country together and values that's enabling a peace and harmony structure within the society. I think that's basically.
Excellent. Thank you. Lorna.
I think for me, it's about making sure that everything that everybody's doing is long term and has a long term impact. But also, I think Stephen mentioned in his speech as well as, what is local communities and how do you engage with them? So you have to understand what that actually means. Just having a project manager or somebody who's Papua New Guinean or somebody who's Papua New Guinea based in Australia does not give you, it's not community-led based aid or help. So understand that as well and how to engage with the communities. And I also think that whatever you do, and I'm going to go back because I love that, is understand how whatever you're doing in communities that they have skin in the game, because that will really deliver results when everybody's working together and people are feeling accountable towards it right across the whole from sort of point A to point B, so that it's there. Yeah.
Thank you. Miriam, last comment about recommended action.
Thank you. We just need to talk more.
Keep talking.
On how we can come up with a way we can make some changes or refocus our mission and way we do business as far as community development is concerned. We have been involved in this business, and we still can see there's a lot more to do, and we need help. We need savvy people to come on board and start asking questions. How we can come up with a way to improve on how we are doing business as far as community development in PNG is concerned.
Excellent.
And I don't want to talk about government. The government, the way they look at things is totally different. But if Australia and other aid donors still want to invest in helping us, and I think we need to stop now and look at how we are doing business, so we improve our way of improve how we have been doing business in the past. Now we are feeling the pain, and most NGOs are dying slowly.
Yeah.
And 80 projects survives because we can sustain ourselves. And I strongly believe in the donors to change their way of thinking to see how can they do business on the ground and address how they can give us money, but think about sustainability in a long term so that they still can survive and operate and grow after the donors leave. That is a big problem. We've been getting lots of money, but lots of NGOs and civil societies are not surviving, not improving. So where are we going wrong is the question that we need to ask.
We do. Thank you for that. I much appreciate it. And appreciate everyone. Stephen, can you close us out with a few closing comments, please?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a great discussion. I guess, we've talked about long-term flexible skin in the game. Dad Baldwin likes that one. And the last one, is like I always say, build on success, right? In a difficult environment, try different things, see what works. If it works, fund it more. And I mean, here you've got, you brought together a group of people all doing things that seem pretty successful in different ways. And, all intermediaries in some way, and maybe think about rather than the donor coming along starting something new, find out what works, try and scale it up. That'd be my sort of closing thought from this discussion.
Excellent. No, I would tend to agree with you. It's find where the hope is, find where the momentum is, the reciprocity of skin in the game. The value transfer that's also being talked about. I think the elements are there. We know. I also think that we're all part of the mosaic. So let's pull together and to Lorna's point, let's pop our head up every now and then and learn from each other and keep talking and saying, okay, let me learn from you and have an attitude of learning. But thank you to Cathy, to Lorna, to Stephen, Miriam and Steve. Much appreciate your time and effort. And let me hand over to Zoe to end us off.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, panel. And thank you, Steve, for facilitating. That was a great session. And thanks, everyone, for joining as well. I hope you found that insightful and interesting. I do feel like, you know, there's so much to discuss and unpack that a series of conversations wouldn't even cover it. But yeah, just thanks so much. And I really like as well the sentiment of skin in the game. And so for everyone to go away and think about what that means for you and how we can, as a community, be more action oriented. Watch this space. There might be a few more of these planned. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Bye.
All right,
very
thanks a
much.
lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks. Okay.